Hey, my name is Martin. I'm a software engineer, and today I'd like to talk about having one-on-ones with your manager. I think this is going to be useful for anyone who has them in their calendar, and I kind of want to dedicate this episode to people who think they're a waste of time. The one-on-ones I had with my first manager were really good and helped me see how valuable of a tool they can be. But after I switched jobs, the quality of my one-on-ones dropped. So I started searching for ways to improve them and eventually had some success. Today, I wanted to share some of the lessons I learned along the way. The first few one-on-ones can be a bit awkward, and it's completely normal. It happens to me too. After all, you're talking to somebody you don't know all that well about things that are important to you, like career or performance. What I've found helps is to use these first one-on-ones mostly to get to know each other. This has always helped me get a bit more comfortable and made it easier to move on to some of those more difficult topics. Prepare ahead of time. I used to have all these ideas that would come up during the week for what to talk about during my one-on-one. And then of course, when I actually had the one-on-one and my manager asked me, "Hey Martin, what do you want to talk about?" I'd maybe remember one of these or sometimes none of them at all. And what really helped me was to just start writing them down in a document, and I could just bring that up. Similar to preparing ahead of time, I also found it useful to keep notes during the meeting. What I've had happen to me before was that I'd have this really good one-on-one where we discuss a lot of good ideas, but then immediately after the meeting ended, I'd forget most of them. So what I do now is I just keep a list of bullet points that I'd go through after the meeting and take the appropriate actions, usually filing a ticket or maybe scheduling a meeting with somebody. It's a really easy thing to do, so I recommend you try it. Avoid spending too much time talking about status and updates. What I found is the more technical managers really like to spend a lot of time here. I think it's like a comfort zone for both you and them. But really, they should be getting these updates from somewhere else, like maybe a daily stand-up. So try and avoid talking about details too much. If you're getting into exactly which tests you're writing, I think that's way too much detail. What you can use this time for is to confirm overall status. The manager will want to know whether things are going as well as they think they're going. And make yourself look good. Bring up some of your recent accomplishments. What you can also do is ask them to do things for you. I found it really useful to ask for introductions or maybe for help from another team's manager. Let's talk about feedback. One of the main things that I look for in a good one-on-one is the quality and the amount of feedback I'm getting. It's actually a great way to find out what do you need to improve and gives you some idea of how the manager sees you. Unfortunately, it's also something that actually varied a lot between the managers I worked with in the past. I learned it's definitely something that you have to ask for. You have to tell the manager that this is something that's important to you and that it's something that you'd like to get from them. Another element to getting good feedback is how you listen for it. For a long time, I've had trouble with feedback that I didn't agree with. There were these bits that seemed to make no sense at all. I was being told that I should have anticipated something that I felt was pretty much impossible to anticipate, that I should have known things that other people on the team had no idea about either. And it really felt like they had this unrealistic expectation that they weren't being fair. Eventually, I figured out that instead of arguing about whether what they're saying is true, reasonable, or fair, which, by the way, doesn't really lead to any good outcomes, you'll get way more value out of simply trying to understand why they're saying what they're saying. So ask lots of follow-up questions like, what do you think I should have done instead? What do you think led to this situation? And it's really a very similar mindset to the one you have when you're debugging a piece of misbehaving code. So use the fact that you pretty much already have that skill to your advantage. I also used to find it really frustrating to get feedback that didn't really feel actionable. These were things like, well, this should have shipped on time. And I didn't really see that connection between, well, what should have happened and what I should have done. So if you're getting feedback like this, where you're not really sure what you need to do in order to improve that situation, then you also need to ask these follow-up questions. You need to change that statement from it being sort of disconnected from you, from being something like, oh, this should have happened, to something like, well, you should have done this instead. It might be a bit frustrating to do all of this at first, and you probably want to do this gradually. because it does take time to ask all these follow-up questions and to get answers for them. But I found that if you do this over time, the quality of feedback you get will improve to the point where you don't really need to ask as many of these follow-up questions anymore. And finally, gathering and giving feedback can be hard work for the manager as well. So if you're getting something good from them, it's worth thanking them for that. Let's talk about career conversations. This is probably not something you should do every week, more like every couple of months. And it's a much longer term perspective than the performance conversations. This is the where do you see yourself in 5 years question if you've already gone through it. Most people don't really like these, myself included, because, well, answering those questions is hard work. You need to make a bunch of decisions, you need to think about what you want. But without doing this work, you won't really have any sort of long-term trajectory. You'll end up doing sort of a random walk through projects and skills that are more of a function of what the team needs than what you want to achieve. Now, the plan doesn't really need to be very complex. In fact, simple is probably better. And most managers will try and take this plan into account in some way. Maybe they'll put you forward for projects that match up with your goals, or help you develop skills that you need. Those were some of the areas I think are important to having a good one-on-one, but I'm curious to hear if there's anything I missed, or there are any topics you'd like to hear about. Let me know in the comments down below. If you liked this video and want to see more, then click like and subscribe. Thanks for listening, and see you in the next one.